So, with us this week, coming from Canada, is a filmmaker, film preservationist, historian, educator, programmer. The list goes on, and that is Stephen Broomer. How you doing?
Well, thanks, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's the pleasure's all ours.
It's double Steven time.
I was gonna say it's great to have another Stephen on the show because now, as you were saying before, Mike being on Mike, we can team up on Andrew. To
Nice.
Yeah, we're gonna jump on you. Even though this is about Steven and his new label, every once in a while I'm just gonna unmic you, just whenever I feel like it, just to gang up on you.
Mute. The mute
Yeah,
button is there.
it is. I'm
Use
in
it
control. So
liberally.
but Steven, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and just in general, before we get started, how's everything going?
Oh, everything's going great. Yeah, I mean, exciting times. We've just started the label. We're in week
Yeah.
5 or 6 of being of having our product available. Yeah, everything's going great.
That's great, man. And if nobody knows yet, this new label is called Black Zero.
Black
They're
Zero.
out of Canada, and you guys kind of specialize. You focus on experimental films from Canada, and that's the one thing that really drew me to your label because. Well, first of all, just the fact that it's focused on Canadian films. Me and Andrew are big fans of the partner label at Vinegar Syndrome, Canadian International Pictures. Love what they're doing there. Loving the films that they're uncovering for us there. And then when I saw your label, which was also focused on Canadian films, but kind of the underground version of that, I was like, dude, this is coming full circle for us.
Yeah.
Like
It's a whole other layer. It's like
yeah.
CIP is discovering like hidden gems within Canadian film history.
Kind of narrative features, like
Yeah.
like
And then Black Zero is going even deeper into those archives and
Yeah.
unearthing like the underbelly of it all.
Yeah.
There's a deeper well of Canadian films than I think we ever knew about.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I think underbelly is right. It's true that these are really niche, and it's a really it's the most extreme kind of niche to have not just a label that's focused around a national cinema, but a kind of formal subset of it. And who knows how much material we'll be able to pump out in the next few years, but I have some projects that are already kind of poised. And from my point of view, although Black Zero has a very long journey, which I'm sure we'll get into, seeing what the guys at CIP were able to do really set a fire under me to get this stuff out here. I think they've just done amazing work with films that, some of them, being someone who studied Canadian film here in Canada, some of them I was quite familiar with. And some of them are really, like you said, hidden gems. So just amazing that this giant, mostly vacant landmass north of America has managed to produce such strange and curious films. And it's so heartening for me as someone who's spent 20 years studying Canadian cinema to see that there's actually an international audience for this stuff.
Yeah, and I think one thing about Canadian cinema, I feel like it's obviously kind of just in general just neglected from cinema history. Like it's not really, we talked about it when we talked with CIP. It's just feels like it just never gets talked about. I think when it comes to Canada, we typically think about the actors and actresses that come from Canada that come into America and like get popular, and that's how we relate to Canada when it comes to the film industry. But when it comes to the films themselves that they produce up there, unless it's an American TV show that goes up to Canada to shoot, we're not like literal Canadian films by Canadian filmmakers is not something we get a lot of, except for maybe like David Cronenberg, who's probably the most popular up there. So it's great that now it feels like with physical media and how it's just exploding right now, that it's allowing us to build a trail to like all these different places that we never really thought about until they appeared. And so
yeah, and I think when we come to things like topics like national cinemas, topics like formal subsets of cinema. You know, we have really great access now to specialized knowledge. Physical media gives us this special bridge to that kind of specialized context. So you can create things that are really exhaustive, and that, you know, if not every viewer out there who acquires a disc of a film is going to want to know everything about it, but now we have the option for that. You know, we've had that option obviously for a long time, but the fact that, you know, we can deal with these kinds of niches to such an extraordinary extent still kind of amazes me.
Oh yeah. And so getting into the label Black Zero, please educate the audience when it comes to kind of the background of the label and how it came about, and also like the name Black Zero. I know the name Black Zero ties in with one of your releases, your first releases.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this goes back a ways in sort of my career, because I started to restore films in the mid 2000s. I'm not backed by any kind of institution. I'm usually working in partnerships with institutions in one way or another, um, or with the generous facilitation of institutions as well. But for the most part, I'm taking on projects that I have an interest in, and so on. And around 2006, I started doing this work. By around 2008, 2009, I had restored about 35 to 40 films. Um, most of them Canadian student films related to a single project. But then I started to look at other films in the avant-garde that I was interested in, and they started sort of to become added to this roster of films that I could, you know, give public lectures about and present and curate at various forums and so on. Um, the idea of putting out a physical disc, although it was possible then, didn't seem likely to me. At the time, I'm talking about 2009, 2010, certainly we had a kind of a home video marketplace that might have supported that. But it was just so rare to see examples of it moving forward. You know, I mean, we have long histories of experimental film on home video through Mystic Fire Video in the 80s and 90s. You have people like Pip Chodorov and Bruce Posner who have done amazing things with putting out the history of experimental film through Revoir, through Flickr Alley and Kino and so on. But those were exceptions. So around 2014, 2015, I had all of these projects that had accumulated, and really the only way for me to share them with audiences was set up a date at an art gallery, and they really are going to want to show it only when I'm there to give context for it and so on. So it was very rare to see these films. And I sort of made the decision then that I'd like to find a way to put at least a couple of them out on home video. So a friend and I got together and talked about this as formalized as a company. And you know, we started to design things, and we unfortunately started to announce things. But best laid plans, things just kept getting pushed off. Potential forms for revenue, or not revenue, funding kept getting cut off. And it became clear after several years that the only way that this was going to happen was to finance it myself. And I'm a working person. It's not an easy thing to commit to. Despite Canada's great history of Arts Council funding, we don't have arts funding for things like home video labels. So then that we sort of made the commitment that we'd do that around 2019, and then the pandemic happened. And that came with its own host of issues, and so things just got put off and off and off. And that brings us to 2022, 2023, and it finally comes together. We get everything pulled together, and now it's in existence. And to get to the second part of your question, Black Zero as a title is a pretty interesting thing to get around, because it's actually the title of multiple experimental films from about the same time, mid-1960s. An American filmmaker named Aldo Tambolini creates a multimedia installation called Black Zero that's quite incredible. Once in a while it still gets staged. Aldo passed away, I think, 2 years ago now. An amazing artist. Around the same time that he did that, John Hofstas makes this film called The Palace of Pleasure, which is the first film I ever preserved. And John was someone I was very close to. I'm sure I'll get into all of that. But basically, Palace of Pleasure was meant to be a kind of omnibus work where you'd have different sequences that represented, various. In his view, they were sort of semi-narrative, semi-impressionistic, psychedelic dream states. And he was able to finish 2 of the 3 intended parts. The first part's called Red Path 25. The second part is called Black Zero. And the third part, which was never finished in his lifetime, is called Resurrection of the Body. So Black Zero, as this kind of beautifully ponderous description of infinity and silence, appealed to me. And I thought over the years it picked up other kinds of associations for me, especially around what a reel of film looks like when it's laid out on a core. It looks like this big black zero. There's also the idea of the black zero, that when you see a countdown leader in a film, it gets down to 2 and then solid black. We don't see a 1 and we don't see a 0, and the 0 becomes a kind of a black zero. And so these kinds of metaphors just started floating around in my head, and it seemed to stick as a title for what we were doing.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. I thought it was a very clever and just brilliant title for this label, focusing on experimental films. I just thought it was just a really nice touch.
Thank you.
Yeah, and one of the things I also notice about, you talk about how a lot of this you had to fund it yourself essentially. And one of the key things I notice about these releases, and we'll get into all these releases a little bit and talk about the films a little bit, but I notice you do a lot, and obviously you do a lot of the features yourself. You edit them, or you do the commentaries, for instance, one of the films, Strange Codes, you literally do a breakdown of the movie that's like 10 times longer than the actual movie.
For those of you interested, the film itself is about 28 minutes. The video essay is an hour and a half. It talk about a breakdown. It gets into the minutia of it all. I mean,
no, but I think that's what's so interesting about your releases so far, is that none of them are very long. They're all within like a little over an hour. The films themselves are not long, but there's this wealth of context and information to go along with them, because this type of cinema is not easy for everybody to get into. And I think you guys do. What I've seen so far, you understand that, and you understand that you have to find a way to translate some of what it is in the film to the audience that maybe needs an introductory. Even for us, we watch a lot of movies, and we've even watched some experimental films, but all these artists have these, very, interesting interpretations and things that we need help with. We need some, and honestly, like I watched Strange Codes without a commentary, and then I decided in the next couple movies, I was like, I might watch these with a commentary first, just because I want to kind of hear, and of course time restraints. I have only so much time to watch all this stuff, but I was like, I think it would do me better to hear the commentary and hear kind of what the movie means as I'm watching it. And so, I thought just the features in this alone were just amazing. Like,
thank you so much.
Yeah, I like the uniformity of the way the releases have gone, in the sense like you have the feature, the commentary, and then like similar supplements for each one. Like each one gets a video essay, each one gets the commentary. And the design overall, was that always the intention to kind of have this kind of rubric set up for each release and to kind of fill those spots, or that just happened?
Thank you, Andrew. I'd say that I'd say in some ways it just happened, but it is true that my thinking around this was, to some degree, well, if I'm doing a video essay for this film, I should also do it for that film, and so on. But there is a reason why these films have are particularly stacked with features, and why I'm involved in so many of those features, which is that the first three releases were always planned to be these films that are particularly close to me,
Yeah.
and that loom really large in my own experience of becoming an artist. And for that reason, I have a sort of a sense of personal commitment to them. Um, this was a fairly new experience for me with building some of these kinds of features. For instance, although I'm accustomed to talking about films, and I've written liner notes for revoir discs and so on, I I had never recorded a commentary track before, and I happened to do two of them at the same time. The one for Palace of Pleasure, and the one and two that are on the newest Severin release of I Miss You, Hugs and Kisses, Murray Markowitz's film. And I did them all, within about 2 weeks of each other, and they were pretty overwhelming experiences. But I also just have to say, it just afforded so many opportunities to expand on particular details that come up in a film, moving in time, right? Um, and yeah, I mean, my sense is going forward for the future releases, my plan is always to do video essays, commentaries, bonus films, whatever we can, because
Yeah.
this, who knows how long physical media will last. I hope forever. I think I'm a McLuhanist. I think forever.
Yeah.
Um, and but there is, like, a particular opportunity right now, to be able to put out a film with maximal context. Hopefully not to cut in too much to, say, the quality of the main feature, but if we can put out a 70-minute film like Everything Everywhere Again Alive, with about 4 hours worth of expanded content, which is what I think it's sitting at, then I think that I've done a service to the film. We've done a service to the film, and to the audience that will discover these films. For me, an awful lot of this is about finding a new audience.
Yeah.
These are not films that ever circulated that far. Palace of Pleasure circulated the farthest. And Arthur Lipset, who made Strange Codes, is kind of universally famous, often for the wrong reasons, because he made a film that inspired George Lucas to name the Force, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love Star Wars, but you understand what I mean by the wrong reasons.
Exactly.
The guy's really remarkable.
Yeah.
And yeah, my sense is that if we can give that kind of context for this kind of work, all the better. Right?
Yeah, the one thing, I guess I want to take it kind of in reverse a little bit. We just talked briefly about how you got into, your career within, restoring films, and how Black Zero became into existence. But I want to go back even further, kind of to your younger days, and kind of how you discovered the avant-garde cinema, and discovered kind of this art house surreal type cinema, because it's not something that I think is readily available when we're younger. It's almost, you have to seek it out, or someone has to show it to you. And there's a whole like discovery process I found when it comes to this particular cinema. So how did that come about?
Well, that's a wonderful observation, Andrew. It's true that it's often posed as inaccessible in some ways, in addition to the fact that it's just hard to see. I think that a couple of things influenced my ability to navigate it. One is that I'm lucky enough to be born into a big city. I'm living in Toronto my whole life, and we have multiple experimental film screening series that are happening and that have been happening here since the 60s. But I mean, I didn't really discover all of that until I was in my 20s. When I was very young, I was introduced to weird art through my parents. I come from a kind of a free jazz and painting kind of family background, and so I'm doubly privileged in that sense. So I would have seen things like Maya Deren films and Louis Buñuel films when I was pretty young, like 9, 10 years old. And then I also around the same time, my cinephilia was piqued by an amazing late night movie show that used to run out of, and I think it still does, out of Buffalo, called Offbeat Cinema, that would show, Giant Gila Monster, old Roger Corman and Ed Wood films, Herschel Gordon Lewis films, things like that. And so in my mind, all these things became very much these like alternative ways of thinking about life and art. All these films that a mainstream audience, a kind of lowest common denominator mainstream audience might be inclined to discount when they first see them because they don't look like anything that they're used to, or they have their codes on backwards or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's always what appealed to me, was the idea of finding things that were so idiosyncratic. Like Palace of Pleasure could only have been made by John Hofstas. Glen or Glenda could only have been made by Ed Wood, that kind of thing. And that I followed that since then. And I hate to say that's what brings me to the present, but I had an experience of going to school for filmmaking, and that's where they try to hammer those codes into you and make you unlearn any kind of passion. And I didn't let it sink in. And
I was going to say, it didn't seem like it worked. So
it's me. No, I was too far down the wrong end. I remember being called into a meeting with my faculty mentor when I was an undergraduate, and him asking if I'd seen anything I liked recently. I said that I'd gone to the library and watched Stan Brackage's Anticipation of the Night, and he glowered and rolled his eyes and said, "Oh, they're trying to make you into one of those, aren't they?" Sorry, buddy. I'm already a card carrying one of those. So yeah, no, that's, and then film preservation and finding these things. That's another question too, because I came to make this little career as a film restorationist sort of by necessity. I went into a master's program in film history. I discovered the character of John Hofstas and read some of his writings about aesthetics. He was a very interesting guy, but a very painful and colorful life. He spent the last 25 years of his life as a advocate for the right to die. And he had been a gay rights activist before that. And he had devoted a lot of his life to activism, and also a lot of his life to like mainstream journalism. He was a very complicated guy, a very interesting guy. But I had found him, and I was aware that he had made this film, and I'd read all these things about this film, but I couldn't see it. So I had to track it down, and it was in pieces at a couple of different places, including the National Archives of Canada, but also in a trunk that John had in his basements for 35, 40 years. And we cobbled it back together. So it was necessity more than anything. I had to see the film to be able to talk about it. And then I found that it was a field where I was able to put all the skills I'd developed in film school. If you learn things about color correction, you learn things about handling film materiality, those become very useful in doing this kind of work. And then, from there, I could even say just about the other two projects at hand. I read about Keith's film, Everything Everywhere Again Live, before I started to work on it. I read about it before I saw it. And then with Lipsit's film, it results from a very long engagement I have with Lipsit's work. I've written a book about Lipsit that should be out sometime next year.
Oh, wow. That's good. Just looking at knowing, what the little bit I know about him, knowing that this was his last film, Strange Codes, and, he had suffered from mental illness and things like that. But he had this whole career before that I don't know about. So knowing that you got a book coming out about him is exciting. That'll be nice to take a look at. Yeah.
Yeah, they're wonderful films. They're all very short, and most of them are far more accessible than Strange Codes.
Okay. All right. But yeah. So just to give everybody, and I know you said you went to film school, and learned some stuff about film. So give us a little bit more of a little bit of an overview of some of the other things that you do as professions that led from your time, your education that you got.
Yeah, no, sure, of course. When I was in school, I was mainly interested in making documentary films. They, thank God, have not survived. Very small. Um, and around 2010 or so, I was doing a PhD. I was, in need of some sense of uh, uh, both direction and calm in my life, and so I decided I'd go back to making films, little intimate 16 millimeter films, experimental films, the kinds of films that I had been restoring and studying, and so on. And so a lot of what I was doing as a critic, as a writer, was informing my practice, and vice versa. So the more time you spend with that kind of technology, the better one can talk about it, right?
Exactly.
Um,
I agree. Yeah.
and yeah, so I started doing that, and that I've continued to do through the years. My films went from being little intimate films to being longer and more substantial. Around 2017, I started to make a 1 hour long 16 millimeter film per year, which is how I've spent the pandemic as well. And I don't think that I managed to pull one off for 2022, but maybe this year. And then, during the pandemic, I started to make video essays, which seemed to me to be like kind of a perfect collision of the things that I had devoted myself to. So I I started a series in 2021 called Art and Trash. That The episodes tend to range from 15 to 45 minutes. Most of them are around 15 minutes. That deals with these kinds of um, uncodified outsider kinds of movies, like I was talking about earlier. So sometimes I'll do like a Findley film, and then I'll do something really more avant-garde. Um, and that we I've done about 25 episodes of that. Some of those video essays are the basis for the video essays that are on this disc,
Yeah.
on these discs. And out of that work, I also started to do video essays in collaboration with Kayla Janice for
Nice.
Severin releases. So I worked with her on the Out of the Blue release that Severin did, on one of the entries in the House of Psychotic Women box, and we've kept up this collaboration, which has been kind of wonderful. Just because she's a genius.
We did an award show for physical media, and we gave her a little award that we had Sergio Mims, the passing of Sergio Mims. We did a memorial award for him, and gave the first one to her, and she's just a rock star.
Yeah.
In our field, in the physical media realm, she just kills it. And just everything, just just film criticism, analysis. She's just so great.
Yeah. So that's been a big part of what I've been doing, is the collaborations with her and my own series. And I'm available to do more for this.
Nice.
Love doing them.
Now,
Yeah,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to ask, is any of your, other than obviously the physical discs here and special feature work on the other, products, things, can anyone see any of your work, or is that more like kind of you just keep it personal to yourself?
It's all online. It's always been
Okay.
public facing online work. It's
I thought since you were promoting yourself, you might as well just tell everybody where all your stuff is.
I'm sorry, Andrew, you're right. Yeah, it's all on Vimeo on a channel called Art and Trash. And yeah, there should be about 25 episodes up there, about what it adds up to 12 or 13 hours of material. If any listeners aren't sick of my voice by the end of this, then you can spend another 12 or 13 hours with it.
I was gonna say, dude, what are you talking about? You got a nice smooth voice.
It's very
That's-
smooth. That's
Yeah.
smooth jazz.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, but yeah, man. I mean, that's fantastic. I really wish I would have been able to have more time to actually watch some of your own personal films, because I did take a look at. I was looking at one of your trailers, and it looked really interesting. I am going to take a look at some of that stuff.
Thank you
Because
very
I
much.
mean, I'm very interested in experimental films, because they just, we talked about this. We had Chris O'Neill on a few
I
weeks
know
ago, and
Chris very well.
and he did some films, and we watched his, and just I just love the one thing I feel like is so great about experimental filmmaking is even watching your films, your 3 films that have been released. It's almost kind of like, in a sense, it's almost like a way of going back to silent films in a way. It's a lot of it's very purely visual, and but it's also emoting. You have to, in silent film, they had to emote a lot through just visuals, and I think that's also, obviously there's audio involved in a lot of these experimental films, but I feel like a lot of it's about visuals, and I think that's a part of cinema that in a lot of mainstream cinema gets neglected, the visual language that's going on in film, and trying to decipher things. And of course, experimental film takes it to a whole other level where sometimes what's going on might not be so clear on any kind of viewing that you have, and that you kind of need help, like with what you've done with your features for these films, and I just love that it just taps into something that's very pure, about film, the visuals themselves. And
thank you, Stephen. I think you've tapped into something really important there, which is, this relationship we have to silent cinema. Well, the people who were making silent films, many of them, especially the most challenging and exploratory of them, they were learning codes, they were starting codes of cinema. So much of what we see from the mainstream, which I love, is so codified that we know where to be looking. It tells us where we need to look and everything like that. But with experimental films, much like George Méliès films, or Germain Dulac films, or even D.W. Griffith making films that his producers didn't think audiences would understand because they had close-ups in them. They sort of they're all adventures of perception in a way that so many commercial mainstream fiction films just can't be anymore, because they operate according to these visual codes of continuity editing and all that. And I mean, I love those films. I think they can accomplish so much, and I don't mean to generalize about any kind of cinema, because we can't. But I think at their best, experimental films do get into something that's like a kind of primordial perception that silent cinema gave us. So thanks for saying that.
It's a lot about it. For me, so far, my experiences with experimental cinema, a lot of it is it goes beyond even just visuals. It's about a lot of the films I've watched, they create a feeling, like like you gain feelings from it. I mean, just the begin. I believe it was the beginning of Everything Everywhere Again Alive. That the sound at the beginning, where he's making the sound, and I was just listening to it. I was like, there's something eerie about the sound. There's like it making me feel a little uneasy. I don't know if that was its intention, but it was just like, I was just like, it's like, and that, and that is the other part of it, is like the sound element of a lot of experimental films, especially with Chris's work that we were talking to him about. Like, so sound elements, a lot of experimental films are very key, and they really can make you feel in some interesting ways. Like, it's really something that you have to be, I think, in the right place for. It's not, experimental cinema is something you have to ease your way into, I think. And I think this is these releases that you have here. And if we haven't said all the release titles here, we should. We have Everything Everywhere Again and Alive. We have Palace of Pleasure and Strange Codes. And I think with all these releases, do you think these are, I know you said that they're personal favorites of yours. Do you believe these are good opening, if people are trying to get into experimental films, that these are great kind of starters?
I think these are the kinds of films that, if you encountered them in a theater without knowing anything about them, and you were in the right receptive mind space for them, all 3 of them could do something to your perception that is unique to each, but it's also kind of a cohesive project. They're films in which language plays a very minimal role. They're films that have puzzling, dazzling visuals, all of them. I mean, one could say that of the three of them, Everything Everywhere Alive is the most like a documentary. For anyone who
Mm,
doesn't know, it's a documentary about it's a documental diaristic film about a commune. Um,
yes.
but it's doing all these weird things. You observed the sound, but there are all these things also about these kind of logograms that float through the
Yeah.
image, right? There's these like weird etchings and solid colors used as buffers and interruptions.
Yeah, I was gonna say the
Yeah.
transitional color buffers, that yeah, and I was watching the interview with Keith on there, that you had the filmmaker do a couple of the features where they go back to the lake, and the commune and kind of check it out in present day, more closer to present day, and also you did like an interview with him and just getting his it's just invaluable stuff, getting his perspective on the whole film. And just yeah, it's even that's why I say it's so important that stuff's in this, because I think for a lot of people they might watch these movies and maybe not, it might not stick with them because they just they're not on its level. And I think that the features really can bring you to its level and make you understand the films in a whole other way that could maybe make you a fan of experimental cinema. I think that's really important,
We can. I couldn't agree more. I mean, my goal with the bonus features is to make sure that they make the work more accessible. In the case of all three of these films, they can be incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
They aren't for everybody. Not everyone's going to feel the signals they're sending out. But when people do see them and they're curious about them, I want to make sure that they're able to find out whatever they need to find out. In the case of Everything Everywhere Alive, I think that it's really important that and I'm not trying to congratulate myself by saying this, but I think it's really important that we spend as much time with Keith, the filmmaker, and Tom, who started the commune, who's in that documentary we made. And because this is a film that's a record of a particular kind of experience. It's the kind of experience that you can only have if you divorce yourself totally from technology and go out into the woods for years and experience nature as sunrise and sunset and, chopping wood and carrying water.
Yeah.
It is a hypnotic experience in that way. It's sort of like going on a day-long walk. It's really it's like that. And the film is a means of holding on to that experience. But the film is, more 50 years old next year. Um, and these guys, who are the picture of health, and I hope they'll be with us forever, being able to record their sense of what the film is, what it's about, what they were trying to do out there in building this kind of utopia. I think that in itself is something that we don't get immediately just from the experience of watching the film.
Yeah.
And it's something that I hope enhances the experience for some people who want to engage with the topic further than just the film.
Yeah, I think it's also, you say that how long ago that film was made and bringing them back to talk about it. It shows you how important it was for them to make that film, because they remember it. So they remember it in such great detail for that much time to have passed, and still means that much to them to be able to talk about it that well. Because some people, and I've heard this from people that create features, that sometimes you get somebody that's involved in something from many years ago, and then you ask them about, hey, could you talk about this movie? And they're like, I don't really remember that. Like, they don't remember much about working on that project. And it's like, but to get them to come back and be able to really talk about it is shows a lot to how much that means to them, that not only that you're restoring the film and you're putting it out for more people to see it, but that it's that it's that important to them, that this takes it a step further. I'm sure it's really important to them that you did this.
I was just gonna ask, what type of reaction did you get when, like, you obviously, I'm assuming you approached them to, I don't know if you had to ask for permission or just ask in general, like, hey, we're putting this out on Blu-ray and 50 years after it came out. Do you want to talk about it?
Well, the project was a full collaboration with Keith, so he was involved the whole way along. Um, in many, he led certain processes of it. We shared others, and the people who are being interviewed in the documentary, the people who appear in the documentary, are like his oldest friends. He's known them for half a century, and And the film was important to all of them, and the place was important to all of them. So, I mean, we certainly asked for permission. We didn't feel we had to really because it was such a family gathering kind of event. But we made sure that everyone was kind of comfortable with our presence there, and I think they've been very keen about the idea that the film is out there in the world. I mean, even though it's a very intimate film and it depicts them in the midst of these tumultuous times in their lives, they've been so happy that people want to see it.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the things that I'm proudest of about the disc is the liner notes, which we got this wonderful Canadian artist, Anna Gronau, to write. And Anna had actually been the person who was instrumental in bringing all these artists out to this commune. She was the bridge for Keith and the Anderson brothers and other people who turn up in that film to come out there. And I think her liner notes do a wonderful job of acknowledging the kind of the successes and failures and the strange times of that experience.
Yeah. And so I would say, I don't know about Andrew. I didn't really get a chance to talk to Andrew about all what we all felt about these three films. But I would say out of the three, I want to talk about Palace of Pleasure, because I feel like that one stuck with me the most. And yeah, I know you've spoke a little bit about the director, John Hofstede. I can't ever say. Yeah, I can't say people's names. That's my thing on the show. But I just. I kind of got it, yeah. But it really stuck with me. I thought that the visuals were just amazing. Like, the two sections, the split screen, and kind of pairing it with the images of wartime. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was, it's one of them things where I didn't get a chance to go too deep into all the features. I did watch. I saw that you had another one of his films on here. One of his lost films, the Columbus of Sex.
It's a recreation of well, not really a recreation. It's a kind of speculative recreation of a section of Columbus of Sex.
Okay.
In some ways I feel bad because I wish we could have the original, but it's whereabouts is unknown. I suspect it's in the lockup at the Hamilton Police Department. It is a banned film.
Oh, okay.
Him and Ivan Reitman and Dan Goldberg went on trial for it in 1970.
Oh, wow.
That's they were his producers. The guys who made The Hangover produced The Columbus of Sex for John.
Nice. Where's that biopic movie? Where's that movie? I want to see that.
It's a pretty compelling story. It was the subject of my first book. Their trial. It's a bizarre one of the major cases in the history of Canadian censorship.
Okay, I might have to.
I was just going to say, I don't think people in modern times, younger generations, realize that for a good while in the 20th century, a lot of films were banned, banned from exposition, banned from showings anywhere, and it was illegal for you to see some of these, to the point where if you were in some underground theater somewhere, you could be arrested. The police would raid if you were watching a certain movie. That's just kind of a mind-blowing aspect to think about for today's audiences, I think.
I could blow your mind some more, Andrew, and say that I believe that The Columbus of Sex is still a banned movie, so perhaps we could all be arrested.
Uh-oh.
And
no.
my message to the Hamilton police is, come at me, I dare you.
Oh, yes, please, please. Can we do a second podcast from the cell?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It'll be like, live from inside of the prison cell where we watched a movie.
Yeah, like Johnny Cash.
It's a bizarre story, too, because the film itself, from everything that we know about it, from the pieces I've been able to reconstruct from the trial testimony, it was a relatively timid film. It wasn't like Flaming Creatures or something. It wasn't something that would really shock and appall people in, I don't know, cinephiles and big city audiences wouldn't wince at it. But for some reason, in a small town in Ontario, it really provoked the Vice Squad, and they felt that it was, essentially
I would
theme.
say that seems like often the case in a lot of those situations where things are banned. There's almost a hyperbole, a build up, and over exaggeration of the harm that it's doing or what it's actually depicting.
Yeah.
And it's done to kind of, I say propagandize the scandalous nature of it all, where, from in another context, it's probably not that scandalous. For me, when it always comes to the, censorship and all those things, it's an interesting footnote in not even footnote, it's part of cinematic history because there's been censorship in every single kind of area here in the US, Canada. Of course, we talked about in England with the video nasties. What Stephen, what's the category 3 films
Cat 3 films in Japan or
in
China.
Asia, yeah, in China and all
China.
that area and Hong Kong. And it's like every place seemed to have those type of things put in place at one point. And I feel like from a modern perspective, it's so odd because we have access to so much of that stuff that 20, 30, 40 years ago was banned. It's now getting like beautiful Blu-ray releases and deluxe packaging and all that kind of stuff where like years ago you couldn't see it
I,
if you tried.
yeah, I
You
wish I
needed
could
bootleg.
get in a time machine and go back and be like, here you go.
Yeah, I know. Here
Like
you
just give
go.
it to the people
Let
that
me
want to
blow your
see it. And like,
mind.
here you go. But I
But
but
I
but one of the
go on.
features I wanted to bring up that I did watch from the Palace of Pleasure disc was the Looking Cure. And
Yes.
because I really love the idea that this film that the director he looked at this film as being kind of like a therapy, like I love the idea that he had this idea that cinema could be therapy because that's something I've thought about for a long time, that film can be something that can really be good for your mental health if looked at in the right way. And I think it's good for my mental health. I get it's things that put it, depending on what I'm watching, can put me at ease and put me in the right mind space and make me feel reassured about myself depending on the film I watch. And like, it's I thought that was a fascinating look into somebody trying to do something for good, using film. So yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and the film
John's
itself is so bright. I was just gonna say, Steven,
Please.
both Stevens actually. The film itself is so psychedelic and so trippy, I guess is the colloquial word for it. And it's just the whole time I was watching, I was like, I felt like this would be screened with Andy Warhol back in the 70s. And of course, that was brought up in the video essay. So I was like, oh, I was on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, John's whole idea of dual screen environmental filmmaking, in a sense, comes from Warhol. It comes from not just, I mean, it predates Chelsea Girls, but it comes from something that Warhol did before that in around 65. He did this thing called the Exploding Plastic Inevitable. It was a multimedia happening. You'd go into this space and he would be playing his films on multiple projectors, and he would also have stroboscopic light shows and things like that. You'd have the Velvet Underground playing on a stage. You'd have the Warhol Factory people dancing, and you'd also have like Motown records playing at half speed or double speed or something. And it was meant to be a kind of sensory overload. And of course, the thing that really distinguishes John from Warhol is that there's a sense in Warhol of kind of electric tribe declaration, like this is us, we're here, this is contemporary life. But it doesn't have any pretenses about healing you, and if anything, it wants to do the opposite. It wants to mess you up. And John, I think, was in many ways, through much of his life, he was quite tormented. And his ideas about therapy come from a lot of post-Freudian ideas in the 60s, the most colorful of which, and I think probably the most relevant to what he did, is a guy named Wilhelm Reich, who designed these metal boxes that he called orgone accumulators. He believed that orgones, a term he coined, were a kind of neurotic energy in the universe that caused lots of different problems, including sexual anxieties and cancer. And so he designed these boxes that people would sit in to accumulate their organs, to release their organs. And it's like grade A quackery, but done by a guy who was actually a kind of beautiful genius who had studied with Freud and had written incredibly important books about the human mind. And it got him landed in prison. You know, he pulled that shit. And I gotta say, I think he did it very sincerely, very earnestly. I think he legitimately believed in orgone therapy, but he pulled that shit in America, and the FDA went after him and threw him in jail. Because you can't peddle a fake cancer cure, right? And I think that what John felt he was doing was something like using cinema as an orgone accumulator. You know, we were supposed to watch this film and it casts a kind of spell over us. We participate in this seance and it draws out all of our neurosis. How? Well, you know, it presents us with images that are alternately calming and provocative. It shows us scenes of pain, war, domestic violence, but it also shows us this, like, the flatness of advertising and this weird illusory hallucinatory depths of kaleidoscopes. And I think that idea of tearing us between those two experiences is what John felt was therapeutic about this kind of form. And what cinema could offer is, like, what we were talking about earlier, that creation of a kind of a space we can enter into that has the potential to change us. And I think cinema can do this in lots of different ways and in lots of different forms. But for John, it was very much about that, like, hypnotic experience.
Yeah, and I honestly, I did. I think I felt like at times I did fall under the spell of the movie. I really did. The best I could, when I got a baby in the room. Sometimes the baby was watching too, so she was like, I could look over at times and she was like watching. I was like
mesmerized.
Do you like this? But and then we got the third film, which is the one it was the first one I watched, and it was the one I was the most had the hardest time kind of grasping, and I think that it's kind of in the title there, Strange Codes, like it's not a film that's easy to decipher, because I don't know that it really can be. I mean, you break the movie down, but
I will also say, even though I break the movie down, I point some directions out that we can use to interpret it, but I'm not sure it's decipherable. I don't think it was designed to be decipherable either.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I remember you saying that, and yeah, it's a film that's essentially, people kind of describe it as being incoherent. It's not something that can really be understood, except for, maybe not even the director understood it. I don't know. It's a lot of.
I think he understood what he was doing, but I'm not sure that the things that he was signaling to the audience were captured by the audience. I think there's like a weird breakdown in communication. It took me a very long time of working through his journals, and what he used to do is, and you see some of this in the movie, he used to make these amazing giant poster boards with notes and lists and scraps torn out of magazines. I think early on in the film you see one of these and it has like a strip torn off of a poster of Kwaidan, of the priest with the tattoos on him, and all of these things for him, I think, were really purposeful. Just like how I think when he turns himself into an archaeologist, he's like giving us these little hints as to what he's supposed to be. But because he doesn't come out and tell us, it leaves us at a disadvantage. I will never tell anyone that I saw this film and immediately understood what he was doing, because it was years of going through his journals and thinking about it to really even grasp a little bit of what it means. And like, if people tell me, well, I'm not up for that challenge, I'm going to say, yeah, I get it. I wish I hadn't been.
I was going to say, without what you're providing on this disc, feature wise, I think people would have a hard time. Like, you know, even thinking about, investing in buying, like if you were just giving them the movie and they bought it, I feel like there could be some mad people. They're like, I wanted to get an experimental film and I watched this movie. And I don't know what the hell's going on. And there's no way for me to understand this movie. But what you do, and like I said, on this disc, like there is literally a breakdown of this movie. It's an hour and a half long. And the movie itself is only about 20 minutes, almost 20 minutes long. It's like, really, you just really take it down to the every shot and really just, helps you translate the movie in some way so that you can invest yourself even more. And I think that that's important. Like that's something where I think if you're a cinephile that wants to really, if you really care about your education,
you're reading my mind, because I was saying like each of these releases, now that I think about it, is almost a lecture in a a film course in and of itself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not only the films themselves, preserved, remastered and looking better than ever, each getting new restorations and all that kind of stuff, but you're also providing an educational system around it to deliver the film in a way we don't see with very many other releases. I mean, we're fortunate enough that in the boutique label world that seems to be the case more often than not. But sometimes you just get the movie and not very much else in terms of contextual information that could be helpful or could be interesting. Most of that stuff you kind of have to seek out on your own. I know, I'm thinking, 10, 12 years ago when we had, bare bones DVD releases of a lot of, I would say, just Hollywood classic films and older films that you really didn't get enough information about. And it was always the information from the special features that I found was the most interesting part of it all, because they would always deliver useful information, insightful information, or even just fun information that's just entertaining. The characters and the people you would meet would be just enriching, and you see a lot of the names pop up over and over again. And I'm now going on a rant now, but I don't even know what I was saying. I'm just saying that each of the releases for each of these films feels like something that would be covered in a film course, which I think is kind of what Stephen was going down when he said academic.
Well, I didn't say I hadn't said that. You said that.
Well, you
but
used
yeah,
the
sure.
word
That's another word for it, definitely. But it's
I appreciate that. We should leave the A word out of this. I have a
you know what? Now that I say it, that's a dirty
relationship
word.
with academia.
Yeah, you know what? You're not the only one who's come on here and has
Yeah.
rebuffed the idea of academia being involved in movies and cinema. And we talked a lot about how academia kind of, undermines a lot of the greatness in cinema, because it has an ego about it.
It likes to put labels on things as being
Likes to put labels
the
on
best and the
things.
worst, and what you should watch and what you can't.
Yeah,
It
it likes to
becomes
limit people's
Yeah.
perceptions of what is good cinema, what is great cinema, what you should be seeing, what you shouldn't be seeing. Kind of like you was saying earlier when you visited, that academic advisor, and he was like, "Oh, you're one of them," and it's like, yeah, but the stuff I'm watching is good. Something is interesting, and maybe you shouldn't be so snuffy about this.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, though I would say that kind of canon building is something that people are guilty of all over the world
Mm.
and far outside of academia too. I mean, I'd say that's like the original critical project is best and worst dressed lists or something.
Yeah.
But I want to respond to this thing that you had said earlier, Andrew, that I thought was really wonderful about the possibilities that are opened up by these bonus features. You described it as being like a lecture, and I appreciate that. But and I know what you mean by that. But I would also say that like we're so lucky now that we can have Blu-ray discs that prioritize the voices of makers as well. The fact that we were able to do the Everything Ever Again live disc is like a collaboration with Keith, where he's doing his own commentary track. No moderator, it's him, and he has this interview. No interruptions. It's actually like a solid 45 minutes of this astonishing mind at work. And it's true what you were saying, that hasn't always been the case with home media. It's something that was often the case with the original boutique label of Criterion,
Yeah.
but so seldomly have we seen studio releases that would prioritize these kinds of things. I remember back in the day, the best you could hope for on a DVD could be something like an isolated music score, and what I don't like to live in regrets, but I would say, like, what a missed opportunity for so much of cinema history, when we could have had a John Ford film or an Alfred Hitchcock film filled to the brim with contextualizing information, video essays, etc. We've had that sometimes, but not always, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's I don't know. I don't know what it was. I guess just that it was not something that was thought about enough yet. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the technology wasn't all the way there yet.
Mhm.
When it came to the, what we were presenting our films on, and maybe that just helped. It limited our scope of what we wanted to do. But one thing I wanted to bring up about you know the specifically the strange codes, like the breakdown, that I loved, and it's one thing it's typically an issue with me when it comes to anything that's like a commentary or something like that. Like, typically with commentaries, I don't love commentaries where they're literally just describing what's on the screen.
Yeah.
But in this case, like, I think it's really important that the things that are being done on the screen are being described and being kind of, to the nth degree, kind of talked about and explained. And I think it really is important for this type of film that you have that type of commentary or kind of video essay or thing where it's really describing what's going on. It's essential, I think. And so that's where um I have to broaden what I like about, because I've talked about before, like commentaries that are just kind of, just kind of looking at, just describing what you look at. It bothers me
Oh,
usually, but
sure.
in this
It's
case, I
totally
loved it.
deviant thing. But with something like this, it's that
Yeah,
there are so many details happening in the image that escape our attention,
yeah.
that describing them becomes like interpreting them, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's what it's a revelation. You're listening and you're watching, and when something's explained, it becomes in the moment learning experience, not something you have to ruminate about later, and try to figure it out and drive yourself crazy trying to figure it out later, especially without having any kind of education about the thing itself. Um, but when you listen to it, watching it, and with that commentary, and it's kind of being explained to you, that's why I just went over to a commentary when I was watching some of these movies, because I was like, I want to be able to kind of understand this a little bit as I'm so that we can talk about it. And, like, yeah, very, very rewarding, I think, to get that information. And but moving forward, like you said, this label's very young, just coming out of the gate. Um, what's I guess the timeline for anything moving forward with anything else?
So, thank you for asking. Because of our long, long delay in getting started, I have a lot of projects in the pipeline for it, but I don't like to say too much about them until they're ready to ship.
Yeah.
Just because we announced a couple of things early on, and one thing in particular, which I'm not going to mention here, is a really exciting set that we'd like to do,
Okay.
but that's very complicated to do for all kinds of reasons. And by announcing it early on, I still get weird letters from people, like, you know, kind of who are angry that it's not out yet.
Oh man. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I've decided to sort of not announce things till they're ready to ship. But I will say this: we're working right now on 3 projects that we're hoping will come out in somewhere in the
Hmm.
summer, and then 3 more projects we'd like to get out by the end of the year. So
Nice.
I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get some more projects out sooner than later. But if we only do 3 more this year, I'll be happy.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I mean, it's tough when you're starting a new label. It's not, you want to. I think what we've seen so far with just the presentation of it, I intend to buy. For me personally, I'm going to tell you right up front, I definitely want to get Palace of Pleasure. That's one that I really connected with, and I want to be able to invest it on a disc level, and get the disc quality and get more into them features. But just it's what I've seen so far from the photos, the look of the booklets, the covers, the cases themselves all look really nice. So I think you did a great job at the presentation part of because of physical media. That's what it is. I mean, holding it in your hands and putting it on your shelf, and that's part of the experience for us collectors. And I think that everything so far is looking really nice, and I just can't wait to see what else I can discover. That's the whole point.
Thank you so much.
But Andrew, anything else before we wrap it up?
Just, I guess, some extra marketing stuff, if you will. Where can people find these discs if they want to buy it, if they want to support the label, and more info?
Thank you so much, Andrew. The best place to buy them, in my opinion, is from me at www.black0.ca. That said, shipping costs being what they are, we have been dealing with wholesalers, so the discs should be available this week from both Orbit DVD in North Carolina and from Diabolic DVD in New Jersey. So absolutely, please do support our wonderful wholesalers as well. If any of your listeners happen to be in Canada, or specifically in Toronto, we also have them at Bay Street Video, kind of local heroes of home media. There are lots of ways to get them. And I'm forgetting, of course, if anyone is in Europe looking for them, despite the fact that they mistakenly say Region A on the back, they are actually all region discs, and they are also going to be available from Revoir, from their boutique. So that's a lot of information to throw at you.
Yeah,
but,
that's good.
We have savvy listeners, I think.
Oh, we do. They know, they hear, they listen. So if anybody ever wants to reach out to you personally, what's the best way?
Well, emailing info@black0.ca comes straight to me. We're a very small company. At this point, there's one of us.
All right. Well, that's easy enough.
That's easy enough.
So, Stephen, thank you for joining us, man. This was really great.
Thank you so
it was
much.
Very educational, and looking at your releases and discovering some of these new films here really excite me about what's going forward for opening up more cinema to people. I mean, it's really important what you're doing, not only for the preservation, because we support any preservation of any kind of film, even if we don't like it. Like it's important to have the whole history and not just part of the history.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
So thank you for what you do, and good luck to all the future releases. Hope it all goes well for you.
Thank you very much, Stephen and Andrew. I appreciate that.